Zipper rolls out to the right, pitches off to Taylor, and Taylor's to the 20, down to the 15, down to 10, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Touchdown, Billy Taylor! Billy Taylor scored a touchdown from 21 yards out. The crowd goes berserk. It was November 22nd, 1969. That they came to Barry, Michigan, all dressed in maize and blue. The words were said, the prayers were read, and everybody cried. But when they closed the coffin, there was someone else inside. Oh, they came to Barry, Michigan, but Michigan wasn't dead. And when the game was over, it was someone else instead. 11 Michigan Wolverines put on the gloves of gray, and as the organ played the victors, they laid Woody Hayes away. Under center is Wangler at the 45. He goes back. He's looking for a receiver. He throws downfield to Carter. Who's got it better than us? Nobody!
Welcome to the Michigan Man Podcast on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew, for Wolverine fans from coast to coast. Go Blue, and welcome to our game day show for Central Michigan. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. With us today to share his thoughts on last week and what's next for Team 146 is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. As we do each show during the season, let's get it rolling with my view from Section 17. They say after you lose a game like we did against Oklahoma, you review it, learn from it, flush it, and move on to what's next. That applies to the players and coaches. For fans like us, I'm afraid many of us don't heed that advice. We let a loss like that one on a big stage linger. It's not easy. We want to get right back to where we were during that 3-year playoff run and think last year was just a bump in the road. Football should be so simple, right? It's not, though. So much has changed since Jim left, and this is a new era of Michigan football. Sharon and his staff are going to have to chart a new course, help write the next, we hope, great chapter in Michigan football. Like anything good in life and in football, it takes hard work and time, something most of us don't want to hear. Oklahoma was a reality check for everyone. I'm not sure that's such a bad thing either. The players now have a better idea of what it will take to be able to beat teams like Oklahoma or anyone else on the schedule. Jim used to say you have to follow the process. I think that's code for hard work, and we all know that. For learning tough lessons as young players and resolving to not let that happen again. A process, a journey, you can call it what you like. It's real, and either you get better each game or you don't. Saturday the sun will come up in Ann Arbor, and Team 146 will once again run down the tunnel to play ball. Central Michigan will be waiting for us, and we can laugh about that, but they will be here to play. It's another opportunity to fix mistakes, get better, and course correct. It's another day in the journey, the process. It's an opportunity. By Saturday, we'll all be ready to tee it up and see this team be better. On Tuesday, wideout Donovan McCulley said Oklahoma was a learning experience for the team and for Bryce.
I think there's a lot that we could have learned from that game. I feel like when plays come to us, we gotta make them. I feel like Bryce learned that he can do it. I think that was a good away game for him. Kind of test him and get his feet wet, like not in the big house. I feel like that's something that we learned too.
Donovan said the team knows they are in very good hands with Biff Poggi as the interim head coach.
Coach Poggi, he's just another one of the OGs. Everything he says we take into account and really listen to it. Really try to apply it every single day, whatever he says. So, Coach Poggi's great, so we'll be fine with Coach Poggi.
My guest today says as disappointed as the team was with last week's performance, they have to fix a lot of things and show signs of improvement against the Chippewas. With us next is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. So stay with us. Joining us on the Michigan Game Day segment of the show this week to take a look back at Oklahoma and ahead to Saturday's game with Central Michigan is beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Great to have you back on the show, Aaron.
Mike, it's good to be back. Football season's here. We're 2 games in to the regular season. Plenty to talk about.
Amen. It is here for real, and it's an uneasy week for many Michigan fans as they attempt to digest that Oklahoma loss. The reactions always interesting. I'm sure you'd agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
You look back, the team hype train picked up steam in the offseason. You beat New Mexico, and for a lot of fans, that signaled, hey, we're back. And then you lose to Oklahoma, and man, does the finger pointing begin. Saturday night was, at the very least, a reality check, wasn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Coming into this year, I think many of us viewed this Oklahoma game as kind of a litmus test, right, to see how this team would fare against high-level competition on the road, how Bryce Underwood would fare in his first start. I wouldn't say the team completely fell on its face because that's probably not accurate because there were opportunities to make this a game and keep it close. But it was clear to me, by the end of the night there in Norman that Oklahoma is simply the better team. Maybe some folks were underlooking them heading into the year. They had an experienced quarterback. They had his offensive coordinator he was familiar with. They had a big bruising defense I think many of us expected. So Oklahoma looked like a good team, and Michigan looked like a work in progress. You can take that however you want to. But they've got some things to figure out here.
Yeah, it's just a fact. And, almost immediately after the game, my inbox was filled with fans ripping the game plan. As if Chip Lindsey doesn't have an idea what his team is and isn't capable of doing right now. But whatever the game plan was, if you get beat up at the line of scrimmage, and a lot of us paid attention to what was happening at the line of scrimmage, it just doesn't matter what your game plan is, does it?
No, and that's Michigan's biggest concern, really across the board on this whole roster. What this offensive line is going to be this year. We had questions coming in, right? This offensive line wasn't very good last year. They made some tweaks, they made some changes. The assumption was that those would work, and these guys, another year experience with another year under their belt, would be improved. We saw some signs maybe week 1 that they were better, but again, it was New Mexico. It's hard to gauge off of that. You go against an Oklahoma team that is big physical up front, and they simply got beat. In fact, we spoke to Chip Lindsey today, and he was asked how many missed assignments there were, and compared to how many times they just simply got beat up front. And he said he was quite frank, and he said they got beat a lot. So I think the offensive line has to go back to the drawing board in some respects. Look, it hurt that Giovanni Olhati went out early. I don't think that certainly helped their case. But they've got some figuring out to do. And I think if Michigan wants to be known as that big bruising team that they were a couple of years ago, that the offensive line is going to need to step up here.
Well, I suppose it was a reality check for Bryce Underwood, too. He probably realized for the first time it wasn't Belleville anymore. And, he just can't win games by himself yet. So we shouldn't read too much into his performance on Saturday night, in my opinion, because games like this against big-time teams, it's all a part of the process he's going to go through this year, isn't it, Aaron?
That's absolutely true. And I don't think he was put in a very good position there on Saturday either, right? You got to take into account, it's his second start ever. He has to go down to Oklahoma to do it in the night game against a very good defense. And we can't discount the Oklahoma defense. I think they're a good team. I think they'll be competitive in the SEC this year. But look, it was clear from the get-go that Chip Lindsey was trying to get him comfortable early. They were doing a lot of this stuff early that they did against New Mexico, the short screen passes, the stuff to the outside. They were trying to establish the run early to get him, acclimated and comfortable, and I would assume gradually build up to throwing some deeper throws. It just didn't work out. We get into this, but the run game didn't really show up much. We mentioned the offensive line struggling. There were communication errors with the receivers that, look, frankly, at times Bryce Underwood looked like an 18-year-old freshman out there, still trying to figure things out. So yeah, you don't want to read too much into this. I think it was in a way almost unfair to Bryce to put him in that type of situation week 2. And I think if you were to ask the coaches privately, they probably wouldn't have preferred playing Oklahoma week 2 on the road. But that was the hand they were dealt, and that's how it ended up.
Yeah, and fan reaction, it's never going to change. I mean, I've been around it for a long time, covering Michigan football. If you beat Oklahoma, you're back. If you lose, the sky is falling. It's falling right now. It's never as good or as bad as you think it is after game 2. The other thing that was crystal clear watching that game was, and you just alluded to this, Oklahoma, led by 7 senior defensive starters, that was a very good defense last year. And that is maybe as good as any defense Michigan is going to see until Ohio State, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I mean, Brent Venables has had his moments in Oklahoma. He's had some good years. Last year was a down year, but there's been one constant with him, and it's good defenses. They weren't very good offensively last year, and that's what prompted them to bring in John Mateer and the new coordinator to try to beef things up. But look, you're right. They're probably arguably going to be one of the better defenses Michigan goes against all season. So, it was a good litmus test. I think it was a good opportunity for Bryce Underwood to see what he could expect going forward. And you just hope that they can improve and A, stay healthy, B, and improve upon this. To where when they get into the heat, the meat of Big Ten play, that they can withstand some bigger, more aggressive defenses. And as you noted, Ohio State at the end of the year.
Well, I've rewatched the game several times now, and when I watched it live, I was upset with the defense, but after reviewing it over and over, the defense really did, I think, play well enough to win. I mean, sure, they gave up some really big third down conversions. They didn't tackle well overall, but they held up fairly well against a pretty darn good offense, Aaron, didn't they?
Yeah, that's fair to say. Look, it's hard to account for a dual threat quarterback. Michigan was obviously preparing for John Mateer and his legs, and they knew what he could do. But it's one thing to prepare for it in practice. And we spoke to linebackers coach Brian Jean-Marie actually today about it, and they were trying to simulate John Mateer in practice, but you're not supposed to. They don't tackle quarterbacks in practice, so it's one thing to simulate it and actually do it. He's a slippery dude, and he's a big dude. He's tough to take down, and there were some holes there. There were some obviously missed assignments, etc. But Mateer's a very good quarterback. I think again another person I think some folks maybe overlooked coming into this week. He's probably a dark horse Heisman candidate. He can do it both ways. It was clear they were trying to establish him in their offense early on. It worked, and they continued to milk it as the game wore on. So, I think that was the biggest variable here. I think Mateer had a pretty good day throwing the ball, but they still forced an interception. They forced 2 turnovers. But again, it was Mateer's legs at the end of the day that extended drives and got some points in the board for Oklahoma. And then Michigan's offense just stalling out so much to where Oklahoma had so many possessions that they were able to score more points than the Wolverines did.
Yeah, John Mateer is a big-time quarterback. He really impressed me. I mean, he's a veteran in that offense, too. That's something else to keep in mind. And I think that's what it looks like against a good defense when you get elite quarterback play, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, they can make or break a game, and you put it eloquently. Like, he's an experienced guy, familiar with the system he was running. He's done it before. He already had a game this year under his belt. So, like, in a way, from a quarterback perspective, you could say Bryce Underwood might be the more talented of the two by the time he finishes his college career. But Mateer was prepared for that moment. He was experienced enough, and he was well versed in the system. That he was, to me, he was a difference maker on Saturday. So, and that basically was the difference in the game was him and his legs. Michigan wasn't able to do enough to stop him, and Michigan just didn't get enough firepower on offense to kind of counteract that.
Well, another thing that I was worried about heading into that game, and I think it came into play Saturday, was how much this game meant to Oklahoma. Because the heat is on Brent Venables, if you talk to anyone around Norman, to perform after the last 2 seasons. I mean, you could just tell listening to him after the game how important that win was. And he was exhausted in the postgame. So, I mean, his players, the fans, everyone knew that. Sometimes you walk into a snake pit against a team that's really talented and motivated for their coach and their school and each other. And you know what? You get beat. And I know that sounds simplistic, but it's true, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. Some coaches, and that was kind of that's how I felt going into the game. As weird as this sounds, Oklahoma needed the game, I think, more than Michigan did, for reasons as you just said. Venables is quote unquote on the hot seat. He felt the pressure this offseason. It's one of the reasons why they went in, dipped into the portal, and got arguably one of the better quarterbacks in there and kind of changed the offense. He needed to win that game, and Michigan not so much. Like, look, fans want Michigan to compete for a Big Ten title. They want to get in the playoff this year. But in reality, you've got a freshman quarterback. You're still trying to integrate in the offense. You've got a receiver room that still, I think, is lacking that firepower. And quite frankly, as we talked about, the offensive line just still isn't up to snuff. They've got some, I think, recruits coming in. I think they anticipated having a healthy Andrew Babalola this year. He's going to be a factor. And it just hasn't played out so far. So I think Michigan's still a work in progress. There's still some growing to do for several of these units. And I don't want to say this is going to be a duplicate of last year because that's not fair. But I think at this point in the time, expectations are different for both of these programs.
Well, unlike the fan base, the Michigan team has to turn the page and go back to work. There are going to be a lot of teaching moments for the staff this week, and I think the players, after a humbling loss, will be receptive students. I mean, it's week 3. There is a lot of work to be done, and that's just the plain hard truth, isn't it?
Oh yeah, no doubt about it. They got a lot of prep to do, a lot of things to clean up. I think fortunately for Michigan, the non-conference play continues against certainly a inferior opponent with Central Michigan at home this week. So it's quote unquote a good get right spot for this team to figure out iron out some things, go back to basics, so to speak. And ideally blow Central Michigan out and that way you're feeling better about yourselves heading into Big Ten play in a couple of weeks.
Well, not lost in all of this is the fact Sharon Moore is now serving his 2-game suspension. Unlike Jim Harbaugh's suspension, when he could coach during the week, Sharon will not be allowed to do that. I guess he'll be at practice this week. But Biff Poggi is the interim head coach, sort of. I mean, I think it's a good move, though, Aaron, letting Chip and Wink focus on their respective units. Yeah. That's much more important, isn't it?
Yeah, it made the most sense to me. We were in the last couple of weeks, we've been kind of going over who could be the guy, right? Who on the staff has had coaching experience, the knowledge and et cetera. And Biff just made the most sense. He spent the last couple of years, as we all know, as a head coach at Charlotte. He's familiar with the inner workings of the Michigan staff. He returned this year as associate head coach at Sharon, so he's been doing a lot of following around Sharon. And is taking in his day-to-day. He was around Jim Harbaugh a lot. So he's prepared for this moment. And things aren't going to change much, right? Like Chip Lindsey could have been an option given his past as a head coach. But I think smartly, they're letting him stick to what he was doing, calling plays, working with Bryce Underwood and the quarterbacks, and giving him less things to have to worry about. So otherwise, things are going to remain pretty much, the same thing. Wink Martindale will still run the defense. The coordinator, J.B. Brown, is still head of special teams. It will be, Biff on the headset. He'll probably have the final say on maybe going for it on maybe, third or on fourth down, punting, kicking, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't anticipate much changing. It's just going to be a cosmetic deal where you'll be seeing a lot more TV shots of Biff Poggi than you did in the past.
Yeah, I agree with that. Well, for the fans, a win over Central Michigan on Saturday will be a feel-good kind of day. I mean, after a loss like last Saturday, it's always interesting to see, though, how a team responds the next week, regardless of who you're playing. And that's what I'm waiting to see on Saturday, Aaron. Does Michigan shake it off and play with renewed passion, clean up their mistakes, or is there a hangover? Because it's going to be interesting to see which it will be, won't it?
Yeah, no doubt about it. I think Michigan's got something to prove up front with the offensive line, the run game. They've had some long runs and explosive runs in the run game, but they haven't been able to really establish dominance at the line of scrimmage through these first couple of weeks. So I think Saturday will be important to that. I think you need to see a guy like Jordan Marshall, light a fire and do something. I think you need to see some cohesion from the offensive line. If there's one positive, or one serious positive out of the passing game the last couple of weeks is there has been no turnovers. Bryce Underwood still hasn't thrown an interception, so that's a good thing. But I think you're going to see Chip Lindsey do something similar and try and just get the offense going early, and roll from there. Luckily for them, they've got another week or two, another week to prepare for Nebraska. I think they've learned. There's been some learning done from Saturday. A lot of people have been calling for more run plays for Bryce Underwood. I'd be hard pressed to see. I don't think we're going to see much of that Saturday, just based off the opponent and the risk of getting injured. But no, I mean, you want to see a blowout. Ideally, you want both sides of the ball to play well. This is a Central Michigan team with a brand new head coach, new scheme, new look. So if there's ripe for a get right game, this is certainly it.
Well, the Chippewas surprised many by going out to San Jose State a couple of weeks ago and winning the opener, a game in which they ran 55 of their 70-some-odd plays. And that didn't work on Saturday against Pitt. A new coach, a lot of players, but the bottom line and the reality is Michigan should be able to do what they want against these guys, shouldn't they, Aaron?
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. CMU brought in a offensive line coach former offensive coordinator, Army, Matt Trinkle, and he does what you would expect him to want to do. As you pointed out, he wants to run the football. They're going to try and shrink the game, stay in the field as long as they can, and effectively play keep away from Michigan. That would be the goal, to try and keep this close. I actually got to watch most of that San Jose State game on a couple of weeks back. They're big and beefy up front on the lines. They got some key guys on the defensive side of the ball. They like to force turnovers. So I think the pathway to victory here for Michigan on Saturday is to, I think, establish the ground game and not turn the football over. And I think if you do both of those things, I think they should coast. As I said, this is a senior team still trying to figure things out. They like to play with 3 different quarterbacks. I believe that is going to be the plan on Saturday. So they're going to try and do some things, keep Michigan off balance defensively. I think their intention is to try and extrapolate the games a little bit and give them kind of 3 different looks. We'll see if that works. But ideally, if you're Michigan, you keep the ball out of their hands, run up and down the field, and take an early lead. And that way you can kind of coast to victory in the second half.
Well, in reality, this is the kind of game where you have to work on the fundamentals, which we saw were sorely lacking on both sides of the ball for much of the game last week. I mean, the O-line, they need to come out nasty and fundamentally do their job. And the defense just needs to start tackling better. I mean, you only get 12 cracks at this thing every year. And no matter who you're playing, the goal is to get better. And that has to be goal number 1 this week against the Chips, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised at how poorly they tackled on Saturday. It was something Wake Martindale had spoken about in camp and in the offseason. They made an emphasis in camp, at least they said they did, in improving the fundamentals, and that include tackling. I think preparing for a dual threat quarterback like Mateer, they knew what was coming up. So it was a little surprising. But in some respects, I guess when you think about it, it does make sense. First couple of weeks of college football, you do see, routine mistakes like that. They don't play preseason games, as I mentioned earlier. They don't tackle the quarterback, so a little bit maybe of a surprise for them. Certainly, they're going to have to improve the tackling Saturday because Central Michigan will want to keep the football on the ground. The quarterbacks do hold the football quite a bit. They have multiple running backs involved. They try to be slippery and try to get outside. So I have to think the renewed focus on tackling is going to be a key factor in Saturday, because if they struggle again, you might see some drives from CNN. You might see them put some points on the board and make this interesting. So tackling certainly defensively will be something to watch.
Well, final question before we let you get away, Aaron. A win on Saturday, as we've been discussing, is expected. How Michigan gets the win and whether they clean things up mentally and physically is what we're all going to be watching, because next week is probably going to be the barometer or tipping game for the remainder of the season, isn't it, Aaron?
Yeah, 100%. You have to go on the road again, against the Big Ten team with a talented quarterback and a talented offense, and a program, I think, figuring itself out. So there's no doubt about it. I mean, we could be talking in a couple of weeks, and Michigan could be 3-1, and I think some folks would forget about the Oklahoma loss. But if they go into Lincoln and drop one there, you're staring at 2-2. And you wonder, if this team has made the proper improvements after last year. So we're going to find out quickly, I think, what this team's made of, whether they are vastly improved from a year ago. I think there's no doubt about it. Quarterback play is better. I do think they have improved weapons on the outside, but it's going to come down to the run game and the offensive line, whether they can hold up. Michigan needs more from the running backs. They need more from the offensive line. We saw, and defensively, we saw this last year, right? They got off to a slow start. They had poor tackling. They gave up some third and long situations early in the year. I can remember, this time last year against Texas where they struggled defensively. So I think over time, Wake Martindale will figure it out. I think the defense will come to fruition and be fine. It's just a matter of whether they can figure things out offensively. It was the same story last year. We got a long season to go. We'll see where they improve, but the assumption is they can be better offensively, but do they have enough time to figure it out?
Yeah, as we all agree, there's a lot of work to be done, and it starts Saturday at noon against Central Michigan. So with us today has been beat writer Aaron McMann from MLive. Aaron, always a pleasure having you on the show. We, as always, thank you for being so generous with your time, and look forward to another visit soon.
Yep. Thanks, Mike.
On Quick Hits today, Rod Moore is expected to play for the first time this season on Saturday. Zeke Berry is a game-time decision. Gio El-Hadi and Marlon Klein are getting better, but we don't know if we'll see them on Saturday. Here are a few game day notes of interest. Michigan leads the series with Central with 4 wins against no losses. The first meeting was in Ann Arbor on October 3rd of 1931, a 27-0 Michigan win. The last meeting was in Ann Arbor on August 31st of 2013, a 59-9 win for Michigan. Head coach Matt Drinkle is in his first year at the helm in Mount Pleasant. He comes from Army, where he was the co-offensive coordinator and offensive line coach. His offensive line won the Joe Moore Award last year. This is his first year as a D1 head coach. Last year under Jim McElwain, the Chips were 4-8 overall, 2-6 in the MAC. Their last bowl appearance was in the 2021 Sun Bowl against Washington State, a 24-21 victory for CMU. The weatherman is calling for another pretty good football Saturday. It will be cloudy with temps around 70. Winds will be light and variable. There is a 20% chance of rain after 3 p.m., so we might stay dry during the game. The game can be seen on BTN, with kickoff scheduled for just after 12 noon Eastern Time. Okay, last Saturday is in the history books. There were hopefully a lot of lessons learned by both the team and us. The good thing is we have plenty of football left to play, and there is no reason to hang our daubers just yet. We wait a long time for these games, so let's get out there on Saturday and enjoy another opportunity to watch Michigan football and see what we fixed in the last week. Next week brings another big-time test for us. We travel to Lincoln to take on a much-improved and I'm guessing undefeated Nebraska team. It will be another tough road environment and a good barometer for Team 146. On Tuesday's Visitors Edition, we're scheduled to hear from the first-year radio play-by-play voice of Huskers football, Kyle Crooks. He's taking over for a great guy, Greg Sharp, the longtime voice of Nebraska, who lost his battle to pancreatic cancer last February. On Thursday's Michigan Game Day show, we hope to have Clayton Safey from the Wolverine on 3 join us. So make sure you tune in to both shows next week. That does it for another week, though. I'm your host, Mike Fitzpatrick. Have a great Wolverine weekend, everyone. Think victory, beat Central Michigan. Until we meet again, take care, and as always, go blue. Thanks for joining us today on The Michigan Man, here on Wolverine Sports Radio, a member of the V Sporto Network, and in partnership with SB Nation's Maize and Brew. Our listener lines are open 24/7 for your calls at 313-263-4842. That's 313-263-4842. Or email us at themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. That's themichiganmanpodcast@yahoo.com. The Michigan Man Podcast is produced at the studios of Robin Lynn Productions, Allen Park, Michigan, and is not affiliated with the University of Michigan. Go Blue!